Hello, I'm Chris Stafford, and I'm delighted to be welcoming Elizabeth Emery to host this brand new podcast, Off the Front. Elizabeth is a team trial national champion. She also competed in the Tour de France 5 times. She was 5th at the World Championships, and she won not only the Pan Am Games, but also the Pan Am Championships and the Tour of Japan. And she's going to be talking about all things cycling with some great guests. But first of all, welcome, Elizabeth. I'm delighted that you've agreed to host this brand new podcast because I think it's going to be great fun.
Oh, I'm so excited to be doing this. Thank you.
And obviously, you know everybody in the world of cycling. So tell us who you've got on our very first episode.
Well, our first episode, we have Emma Pooley, who was a road racer and has recently switched to multisport. We have Alison Dunlap, who is now a coach. And we have someone I just recently met, Elly Blue, who is a writer and publisher.
Well, that's a fantastic lineup to your very first episode. And how often are you going to bring us these episodes? What can we look forward to then in the future?
We are going to be posting new episodes once a month on the 1st, and we already have our next lineup ready to go, so we're excited about that as well.
Well, we know how popular cycling is and so many different forms of cycling to be enjoyed worldwide with some fantastic guests. As we've said, you've got a great lineup, so over to you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, let's get started. Emma Pooley road raced from 2005 to 2014. During that time, she won 9 Olympic, World, and Commonwealth medals, 6 World Cups, 3 long course duathlon World Championships, and was the 2010 time trial World Champion. She then switched to racing multisport events. We discussed that transition, what kind of racing she's doing now, coaching, her future fame and fortune in pocket porridge, along with lots of other great stuff, including her PhD in engineering. While we were planning the interview, Emma was in the French Alps training and racing, so the internet service was not as good as it could be. So after a couple starts and stops, we finally got a good connection. And we jumped right into the conversation. I immediately asked Emma what she thought about this year's La Course, the 2-day women's version of the Tour de France, which started on July 20th, just before our conversation.
I kind of wished I'd done it, but you can't just jump in and do one race, so that's, meaningless anyway. And then a bit of me was just frustrated because, it was just like half a race. And a lot of people said that, even people who aren't outspoken on the side of, cycling feminism said, well, it could have been like a real race. And I just think, more interesting, I think, for spectators, but it could just be so much more. I wish ASO could see the potential and that, that women's cycling is not, it shouldn't just be something they're like, oh yeah, well, we'll chuck you a scrap. It's a real sport, and it's a really good sport, and they're missing out. And they could be trailblazers. They could be showing the rest of the world, And I just feel frustrated about it. And I thought that at this point, so long after they agreed to have a women's race at all, that they'd be a bit further on than that. And then there was a bit of me that wanted to do it because, I'm a climber and a time trialist, so it would have been cool, but. I don't race professionally anymore, so I can't.
Right. I was really struck by the movie Half the Road, and it really explained a lot of the feelings that I had when I was racing in the 90s, and it just made the UCI look so terrible.
Well, they are terrible, I'll be honest. They are absolutely terrible. But, I wish I could have raced in the 90s because of, what you guys were able to do, and it's unbelievable to think that cycling was actually more egalitarian back in the 80s and 90s than it is now, and 2, that sports like boxing and cricket now make cycling look old-fashioned, and they're not exactly, you wouldn't think they would be beacons for equality, but yeah, it is, frustrating. Short of people changing their minds at the top, and I mean really changing their minds and not just saying, oh yeah, Brian Cookson got elected partly by I think what he was paying lip service to what he saw as troublesome women, and I think that unfortunately it was just lip service. I haven't really seen much change, and that's partly because the UCI is a mammoth organ. Well, it's just run by grouchy old men, right? So it's going to take a lot to turn it around, and unless he actually brings reform in, I don't see really what's going to change. We need to get more women working at the UCI after they finish their careers, which is difficult for many reasons. And then it will slowly change, but it's just going to be so slow. And I just think that if only some of the people at the top could just be enlightened and have a road to Damascus moment and just see what they're missing out on, and just also how sexist they're being. I think, they could change overnight, but it doesn't feel like it's going to change at the moment, not with the people who are in charge currently. As I have thought that the best way, in a perfect world, I would find a sponsor and we'd put on our own sodding Tour de France. And I think if the timing were right and the prize money were right, teams would come whether the UCI sanctioned it or not. And we could stick two fingers up to the UCI and their stupid rule about 10 days and you can't ride more than 140 kilometers in a day, because women can do Ironmans, they can do marathons, and they're perfectly fine with distance. Okay, at the moment, the women's peloton doesn't train for that distance, but they would be absolutely fine. And I think if you'd need a freaking massive sponsor, but if you could put on a really good race with the prize money so teams came, and also obviously TV coverage is the main thing, and get it on the networks, it would be such a hit that the ASO would look like total idiots for missing out on it.
I agree, and I really hated the argument of, women can't do that, because it makes no sense. Why would a woman train for that distance if there are no races for that distance? It just makes no sense.
Well, of course, exactly. And it comes back to, there's a whole other argument about the professionalization of women's sport, and there's a lot of girls racing ostensibly professionally, in inverted commas, but they're working jobs as well, or they're students, or both. And you wouldn't expect the boys to ride the Tour de France working 30 hours a week. It takes a lot of hours of training to do that kind of distance. And it's more complex than simply put on the race and there you go, women's cycling is going to be the same as the men's. And I wouldn't want it to be the same as the men's, to be honest, because men's cycling has got plenty of problems. But I'm just saying, and I'm not even going to start about the prize money because that's a whole different story, obviously. But, you can't argue, well, I'd love to see equal prize money, but you can't start talking about money until you've got the races. And I would just like to see equality of opportunity. I don't honestly think anyone's got the right to make money out of sport, because, what a pointless activity ultimately. But I do think that we should have the right to have the same opportunities to race as the boys, and the opportunities to race and inspire the next generation to take up sport, whether just to take up sport or take up cycling specifically or race. And when I started cycling at 22, I saw the Tour de France on TV, and that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do some shitty little race around some flat bit of Holland,
Yeah. I interviewed a rugby player, and they're, obviously all sports are having similar issues in equity, and she said, it's not a money issue, it's an equity issue, and it is. It's offering equity to everybody involved.
Yeah. And I think people want to talk about money all the time. They're always talking about money, and it pisses me off because it makes it sound like we're just kind of greedy. We want money, money, money. We talk about the gender pay gap in other jobs, and no one questions it. And the problem is that if you put a minimum wage into many women's sports where the men have huge wages, if you put a women's minimum wage into, I don't know, baseball or cycling or triathlon or something, you'd bankrupt a load of teams. Certainly in cycling, it would ruin the sport because the teams would die. And the point is, obviously, you can't do that until the sponsorship's there, but the sponsorship won't be there from commercial sponsors until the races that are on television are there, and they won't be there without a race organizer being forced or seeing the benefit of doing that. And so there are some race organisers who really are enlightened, like the Tour of Britain. They wanted to put on, I think they wanted to make it longer. They wanted to call it the Tour of Britain. And you know what? The UCI and British Cycling, so British Cycling won't let them call it the Tour of Britain because they own the trademark on the name. And they think it's only the men's race that's the Tour of Britain. And the UCI wouldn't let them make it a longer race, honestly. And these are the people who are supposed to be helping the sport. I feel like I'm preaching to the converted here. But you're right, it's an equity issue. You're totally right, obviously. And
well, you also touched on another issue about the money is, yes, female athletes would like to get paid more, but there are other sort of auxiliary issues. Like if you get paid more, you don't have to have another job. Or, for example, I recently went to Akron Racers game and they have no money. And so they're,
like they're pulling the tarp over the field when the rain starts, and they're doing all these other jobs which take away from their sport.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't, and I get really angry when especially overpaid male cyclists who took drugs and they're still somehow involved in the sport, or the guys who run men's teams who similarly took drugs but they're still involved in the sport. They criticize women cycling, normally not in public, but sniggering behind their hands about how the women aren't as fit and how it's not professional. But they don't understand that most of the women there are juggling. They're having to compromise between their training and their life, and they really don't. They don't get it, I don't think, and that you can't criticize a sport for not being professional if you don't have some of the. And I'm not, I'm really lucky because I benefited from British Cycling's funding to ride full time when I first got into it. But otherwise, I wouldn't have had a chance. And I was just really lucky that's not British cycling being enlightened, right? That's UK sport because it's an Olympic sport, and so there's equality there. But
what have you found different in your new sports?
Well, it's actually one of the reasons that I was really keen to get back into triathlon after cycling. I actually got into cycling through triathlon. Many years ago when I was an injured runner, and I know that triathlon, well, it's a much more modern sport. So it was set up with the principle of same distances for women, same prize money for women. There were a few races where that's not quite true, but distance is, I think, always the same. And the prize money is one thing, but I wanted to do the cool races with mountains, and the triathlons I've gravitated towards and duathlons and running races, they're all how can I put it, somewhat mountainous. And that's what suits me. That's also what inspires me emotionally, really. I love sport, but I don't particularly love racing around flat crit circuits, and the things that make me hop out of bed really excited to go training, that's mountains and amazing views and pushing myself on climbs. And in triathlon I can do those races, and they are recognized. I think in cycling, if I wanted to get that kind of physical challenge, I'd go and do sportives, which is actually what I do as part of my training, but no one really recognizes sportives as it's not a professional sport. And whereas in triathlon, I get to do these really, really awesome and inspirational races. They certainly inspire me in my training and when I'm racing. Sometimes I beat some of the guys, which is kind of cool. I think the last time so I did the Von Two Man triathlon. I wish they wouldn't call them all something man, but Von Two Man. So it says it's like a half Ironman distance triathlon that finishes near the top of Von Two, and then you run around there as well. And I think I was 10th overall, which isn't bad. I think I was 5th on the run. So it's kind of cool, and that's what sport should be about. It should be about the challenge and the inspiration, and not about being relegated to second best because of your gender, in my opinion.
What's a sportive?
A cyclist sportive is like a Grand Fondo. Is that what you call them in? Yeah, so the cyclist sportive is the French word.
Oh, right, okay.
And Grand Fondo is obviously the Italian word. So I did this haute route race in the Rockies at the end of June, and then another one at Alpe d'Huez, and they're called cyclist sportive. So they're timed, and I guess they are competitive, but not officially races, if you see what I mean.
Are you doing any of the gravel grinder races that have become popular in the States?
No, but I would like to get into them. So I am not a technically adept cyclist, I think would be an understatement. I took it up too late, and I'm a chicken, and my coordination is really poor. I know that from various other parts of my life, like trying to dance or sing or anything. Also terrible at swimming. But so normally, the sight of a grain of gravel, I get all scared. But in the Rockies, this haute route sportive, so that was a 7-day stage race, amateur in the Rockies, just at the end of June, and I had an awesome time. The people were fantastic, and the physical challenge at the altitude was great, and it was so nice to have a really different scenery to ride in. But there's also gravel every day, and I pre-rode the first stage and almost cried because I was so scared. And then actually I found when I had the adrenaline up, it was actually really fun, and it was certainly a challenge because I was rubbish at it. But I kind of enjoyed that challenge. And I was talking to Janelle Holcomb, for example, and Tim Johnson, who were there, and about it. And I realized that there's this whole new, I assume it's new, kind of type of race that's really popular in the States. It's kind of not quite cyclocross, but the gravel grinder races that sound really cool because they're long and they just sound pretty impressive. So I thought I would quite like to try some of them, and I'll have to learn.
They're long and very hilly, and they're not super technical. I mean, they are on gravel, obviously, but it's not mountain biking.
Yeah, but you've got to see me to realize what I consider technical to be. Like I say, I think this all dates back to when I was about 7 and I had my first bike, and my dad took me on a bike ride and I fell off on gravel and got gravel stuck in my knee, and I've never forgotten. And it's like some kind of subconscious sort of gravel phobia, but maybe I can get over it.
A little hypnotism.
Yeah, something like that.
You said that you were terrible at swimming, but how are you managing the triathlons if you're terrible at swimming?
I'm not like drowning terrible, but and I really like swimming. Like I've always swum. I swam on the school team when I was, I don't know how old I was. When I was 14 or something. But I never went to swim club, and I never got, really good. And so I can kind of chug along a 2K or a 4K swim, but to the really good triathletes who've come from Olympic triathlon and like proper pros, I'll lose 10 minutes on a 2K swim and 20 minutes on a 4K swim. And so that's one of the reasons that I go for super hilly races, because generally if the bike has a load of climbing in it, it makes the bike leg longer as a time proportion of the race. So I have more time to make up my swim deficit. And yeah, so that's why I go for races like Alpe d'Huez, Ventoux, Embrun. There's lots of cool ones in France, bizarrely. France seems to be full of extreme triathlon, as they call it. And I just have to choose the races wisely. I've tried to improve my swim, and I worked with some awesome coaches, but the problem is that I don't live near an awesome coach, one who's prepared to do like a technique session every week. And I think I would have to obviously work on my technique regularly, and not just, I tried swimming lots and that didn't help. I just gave me huge shoulders, but I was still slow. So I've just resigned myself. If I'd started at 14 thinking I was going to do triathlon seriously, it might be different, but I think it's too late now. Don't have that much time.
Well, swimming is so technique based. Yeah, I mean, like you can, like one change can make a huge difference.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's it. And I've got a really good friend, and she's an amazing swimmer. She came from swimming to triathlon, and I swam once with her last year, the day after a race, and she just gave me a few pointers that were really helpful. And it's funny because I felt really bad. I'd beaten her in the race, beat her 500 meters before the finish line. I passed her, and she was still generous enough to spend the time helping me to swim better, even though actually that's probably not great for her maybe in a future race. But that just shows, I think, how friendly the scene is in triathlon. I find it to be a really positive environment compared to some days bike races, which could be a little bit stressful sometimes. Yeah.
I want to go back to switching from the pro cycling to what you're doing now, and what was the process of making the switch, and your thought process, and the actual really specific process of changing your training and stuff like that? Well, so I'd
kind of had this idea in the back of my head about wanting to try some triathlons again, and it was actually in 2013 when I was only riding part-time and writing up my PhD, and I was running a lot because it's time efficient and I didn't have much time. And so the idea grew from there, and I knew I'd have to make some change in my training, and that was fine because I basically thought, well, I'll just learn to swim and I can run more, which is great because I love running, and won't have to change much else. And I thought that most of the challenge would be getting sponsorship, because I was hoping that my kind of the things I've done in cycling might interest a few sponsors in terms of kind of, one, maybe being able to get some results, but more to the point, it might be an interesting story. And so it was a big challenge, I'll be honest. Like, sponsorship is hard work. Like, selling yourself to sponsors, quite apart from the time it takes and the communication, it's a process that, you literally have to sell yourself. And it's not something that comes naturally to me. And it's something that is both a benefit of being an independent athlete, as I am now, because in some ways, like, I only work with sponsors that I want to work with. So there's, when you go to a bike team, you take the package of sponsors that bike team has, and normally I wouldn't go to a team, for example, that didn't have a bike I wanted to ride, because it's just such a handicap for someone my size if the bike doesn't fit or something. But you always take the good and the bad together. You don't have a choice. So if you don't like the nutrition sponsor, you might be able to put something else in your bottles when no one's watching. But basically, tough shit, you've got to suck it up and use what the team gives you. And that includes financial sponsors you might not approve of even. So I was lucky. I was never on a team that was sponsored by a arms dealer or a cigarette manufacturer or something, but you don't get that choice. Whereas now I work with sponsors that I think are awesome, and actually quite like communicating with them, even though I'm not great at phone calls and emails, because they're really, like my bike sponsor there is just a group of 3 guys, and they make really awesome custom frames. The wheel sponsor is like a total professor of wheel building, and the guy who makes my clothing, my kit, he's making it from recycled fibers and putting coffee beans in it to stop it stinking. And he's like part-time, and it's like a Kickstarter startup project. And these guys they do really cool stuff, and I'm really excited to work with them. But it does take time, and you've got to sell yourself to these people so that they'll be interested in working with you. And to start with, and that's just hard. You've got to kind of, it's hard to do it for yourself. I mean, I sometimes wish I had an agent who would sell me to people, because it just sounds so arrogant to go to someone and say that you think, I think I'm good, give me some free stuff. It's awful. And I hadn't realized how hard that would be, both in terms of time, but also psychologically. Like, I just find it really stressful.
But you seem to have a really nice relationship with your sponsors, just on your website and whatnot.
Yeah, and it's probably self-selecting, because I haven't gone to anyone that I didn't want to work with. But still, it feels like a bit of a burden, because you go to them and you say, I'll be at this race and this race, and then you feel like obviously you've got to perform, and none of them ever actually seem to mind too much about results, because but it's still a little bit of a, I mean, I think I'm lucky that I've chosen sponsors that are just really awesome, and they put up with me being a bit rubbish at writing blogs and things. But and then the transition in terms of training, well, I don't know. I tried for 1 year in 2015 to be what I would call a proper triathlete. So I already did a few tries in 2013 and 14, and I've always run in the off season. And to be honest, I didn't do that badly in the tries I did in 2014. Especially, I came second at Rapperswil, between Daniela Rief and Nicola Spirig, which is they're quite well known. They're quite good. And 2014, I won the duathlon long distance world championships. I broke the course record at the end of the season, and that was really off a bike season, riding with Lotto that year. And I had a good season, so I had a lot of confidence in my biking that year, and and confidence brings sort of lack of pressure and enjoyment. And so, but I just did a few runs before the race, and I found like I could run really well off bike training. So I went in 2015 quite confident. I got a triathlon coach. I thought, I'm going to be a real triathlete. And then the triathlon coach set me totally different training to what I was used to. And I was well behaved, and I did what I was told. And it's the first time ever that I've had a coach who told me exactly what to do all the time. And so I thought I should do it properly. I'm paying this coach, and he knows what he's talking about. He's a triathlete. And actually, it didn't work for me. And if anything got slower, I was exhausted by the end of the season. I did far too many races and far too much training with no carbohydrate and all this stuff. And I realized that that particular coach and that particular training, it just didn't work for me. And and also caused me a lot of stress because I could tell that something wasn't right. I wasn't really enjoying my training anymore. And that put me off, what can I say, like sort of traditional triathlon training. And I think I've realized since that maybe I was just a bit unlucky with the coach that I chose and the methodology he used. And but now I'm sort of self-coached, but I go to a lot of people for advice. And I've reverted to doing more similar training to when I was a cyclist. So I still work a little. Well, I still talk to the cycling coach who I was with last year, who's just brilliant. He's a great guy and just really kind and helpful. And so I say I do a lot of basically cyclist training, and then I do some runner training on the side, and try and get behind swimming. That's a very long answer.
Do you do other stuff like weightlifting or yoga or stretching and that kind of stuff?
I'm not very into stretching. So that kind of thing. When I had the triathlon coach, whose name I won't mention, but who I'm not a great fan of, he was really into strength training, and I did all my strength training, and I bulked up a load. I seem to carry muscle really well, which I don't like, and it's not helpful for running. Like every kilo counts in running. That put me off strength training, but I now listen to a really good series of podcasts called Science of Ultra, which are really about ultra running, but it's an awesome guy called Sean Bearden, and I'm just going to put a plug in for him because I think his podcast is fantastic. And there's he basically interviews scientists sports scientists in all kinds of things, and it's applicable to lots of long distance sports, not just ultra running. And the argument for strength training and high intensity interval training, even for long distance events, is inescapable. And also the physios I know, they all argue for strength training just for injury prevention in running. So when I get the chance, and I'm not living out of a hotel room, I do strength training. I try and do it twice a week. Stretching, not that into it. To be honest, I only ever stretch when it's a social event at the end of a run. So you know how runners will hang around and just stretch together and chat? I'll stretch then, but the rest of the time I don't bother. Because it's been shown to really make no difference. You have to stretch, you'd have to spend hours a day stretching to make any difference to your flexibility, and there's been not much evidence to show that improved flexibility helps you to avoid injuries anyway. So, and actually, I'll be honest, I'm hyper flexible in my hips, so I don't feel like I need any more of that. So, obviously, if you've got like a sore calf or something, I'll kind of stretch it out, but it's not part of my regular routine. And then yoga, I love yoga. I find it super relaxing. Very rarely do it on my own. So if I'm home and I've got a rest day, I might go to a yoga class with a teacher that I like, and I find it extremely mentally relaxing. But the last time I went to yoga, I hurt my back and I had a back injury for like 3 weeks. And that was the first time I've ever had like a non-crash induced back injury. So I probably have to be a little bit careful now. I'm getting old with the whole yoga thing. I'd love to do more yoga, but it just I guess it just takes time, and you run out of time after a while. And
what about eating and nutrition? You mentioned staying svelte for running.
Eating is a complicated business. It's very simple. You put food in, but psychologically, I think for a lot of athletes, it can become a complicated thing between wanting to be the best, racing weight, as it's often called, as in the optimum weight for your performance, and that is often ties into self-image problems. And I just see a lot of, especially female athletes, that become eating disordered, and I've seen that in running and in cycling and in triathlon. And it's not really like I have never been too skinny, but I've certainly been through periods in my life when I've had disordered eating, which is not unusual at all. I'm not asking for any sympathy or anything. It's just part of being a human in today's world of silly advertisements, I think. But it's very easy to end up with a sort of skewed body image where you think that the skinnier you are, the better you're going to be, and also the better you're going to look. And I certainly find it at races. I find it a bit stressful when I turn up at a race and I feel like everyone's skinnier than me and faster, and I inextricably link those two things. That said, I love food. I love it so much. I love nice food and I love eating, and to me it's a really important social event. And like, I grew up in a family where we value food. We value good food, and we like eating together. And if I go home, a nice meal is the thing we do together, and involving wine and cheese and all the things you shouldn't eat kind of thing, supposedly. And I think that's been really helpful to me in my career. So while I've gone through periods of stressing about my weight and worrying about it, and I've been through periods of not eating chocolate and not eating cheese and trying to be disciplined, at the end of the day, I've been relatively lucky with injuries, I think, and now I look back, I've been around for a while as an athlete, and I think part of that durability comes from having a healthy diet, and by which I mean my weight doesn't fluctuate much winter to summer, and I eat a fairly good balance of food. I'm mostly vegetarian, but there aren't many things that I just don't eat, and I still take great pleasure from my food. And I've tried to avoid the fads and take really good advice. So I take advice from Asker Jokendrup, who's a really good sports nutritionist who's also a friend, and I read up on it. But it's not rocket science. It's simple. It's just like for me, like for everyone, I think the implementation of the good advice is the difficulty, because it's always, to be honest, it's always more fun to eat cookies and chocolate than pasta and tuna. So I don't know, specifics wise, I guess that was a very long answer, sorry, but specific wise, I guess the year of overtraining and over racing in triathlon taught me how important carbohydrate is. So I'm not saying there isn't a place for certain training sessions performed with low carbohydrate stores, but that it certainly doesn't suit me as an athlete to do a large bulk of my training with low carb, because I end up exhausted and really slow. I like real food as opposed to fake food. So mostly when I'm training, I will bake my own training bars. In fact, I want to write a cookbook because I think I've got quite a good recipe. Are
those the oat things?
Yes, you follow me on Instagram, don't you? Yeah, pocket porridge. Yeah, that's my idea of how to finally, make a living out of this.
Do you miss being a pro cyclist and sort of that team aspect? Because I would say that for me, from the outside, that looks like one of the biggest differences.
Yeah, I do. And it's funny because I don't mind saying this. The team is both a blessing and a burden when you're in it, right? You know this. Team life and kind of having to fit in is stressful because you've got to. Yeah, I'm independent. I took up cycling pretty late, and I always wanted to do my own thing in terms of training or travel. But it is a blessing in terms of the company, and that teamwork is just so satisfying when it works out at a race. Obviously, it's pretty distressing when it doesn't, and when things go wrong in teams, it's not great. But I was really lucky with the teams I was on, and I met some brilliant people through cycling, which I'll be honest wasn't the reason I took it up. I took it up because I wanted to race and do well, and I've made some of the best friends of my life through the sport and through being forced to share a room with someone for 10 days or 2 weeks, and yes, and I'm really grateful for that. That's the greatest thing that cycling gave me, was the people I met along the way, and I really mean that. I've learned a lot from them, and I'm still in touch, not with everyone, but with some of them. And the sad thing is, obviously, I miss the team aspect, but also miss the actual people, and because you meet people from all over the world, and you're on teams with people from all over the world. When you retire, you don't see them as much because they live in the wrong bloody place. So I wish I could see more of old friends from cycling, but maybe one day when pocket porridge is making me millions, I will travel around the world, and by bike to be eco-friendly, and I shall pedal to visit all my old friends and take them porridge, and or something like that.
Well, great. Well, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Ditto, and thanks very much for taking the time.
This month's tip is from Alison Dunlap. I used to road race with Alison back in the 90s. After the Atlanta Olympics in 96, she switched to mountain biking. She surprised everybody by winning a World Cup that year. She is 2001 mountain bike world champion, 13 times national champion, 2 times Olympian, and now proud mom of 6.5-year-old son Emmett. Currently, she is a coach and offers us a coaching tip useful for any sport, not just cycling, and also outside of sport. All right, so how about a tip for a rider who is seasoned but is trying to break into the next level, and not necessarily a skill tip, but something to help them break into that next level?
Well, I think the biggest thing is getting a coach. A lot of riders, try and do it on their own, and you will get to a point where you'll kind of plateau. And, there are the exceptions, people that are very knowledgeable in physiology and training, but most riders, need help to get up to that next level. So getting the coach, I think, is the first step. And then if you have a coach, it's really, I think the biggest mistake riders make, especially at the upper levels, is that they don't rest enough. And we get panicked about, if I want to keep up with all the other girls on the circuit, I better train harder than them, which means I need to train hard every single day. And I cannot take a day off because that'll put me behind. And I can't go easy because, if I go easy, then I'm missing a day of training. And what ends up happening is you get really good at going medium or medium hard. And so we make the mistake of, we're really good at training hard, but we're terrible at resting. And I think that's just true for people, especially busy people in general. We never like to slow down. When was the last time you sat on the couch and you just read a book? We don't do that anymore. So that, I think, is a really useful tip as far as, ride really hard on days you're supposed to ride hard, but then you have to give yourself, 1 or 2 or 3 days to recover. And it doesn't mean doing nothing and sitting on the couch. It's, it can be active recovery where you're riding for an hour super slow on the bike path. But you absolutely have to have those days so that your body can recover and, the muscles can regenerate, and then you come back. And when you get to train hard again, you're ready to train hard.
Right. And after the season, how much rest are you recommending for your riders?
At the elite level, I say 4 weeks of not necessarily not riding, but no structure, no training program. And it's always in September or October. And it's just ride your bike if you want to, and don't ride if you don't feel like riding. And if you want to ride hard, great. But, make sure you take some time off as well. And I just tell everybody it's kind of up to them, but that this is your big chance to really rest from the season. So don't go crazy and, think that now you have all this free time, you can do all these crazy, big, long, epic rides. Sure, you can, but, make sure you're not doing those every day.
Right. I think that's great advice. I agree with you. I think people don't rest often enough. And sadly, the result is being really good at medium.
I know.
Well, thanks, Alison. I really appreciate you offering the tips. I think that's great.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
My next guest is writer and publisher Elly Blue. She has been publishing Taking the Lane, a zine, since 2010, with the 14th issue, Bikequity, coming out in the next few months. She is also the author and editor of several books, including Bikeonomics, Biketopia, and Our Bodies Are Bikes. In her work, she merges interest in feminism and cycling advocacy, along with sci-fi. I think this is such an awesome combo, so I was super excited to talk to Elly. I started off by asking her about what she's currently working on.
I recently finished running a Kickstarter for the 14th issue of my feminist bicycle zine, which is called Taking the Lane. Issue 14 is called Bikequity, and its focus is the intersections of issues like money, class, and identity, things like race and gender and, all the light and carefree stuff in life. It's often hard in the bicycle movement. There's a lot of nervousness around bringing up some of the hard topics, but they're all my favorite topics. So,
why is there resistance to bringing up those hard topics?
I think a lot of the established bicycle advocacy in the U.S. has for about a century and a half been very white. Some of the history of that is back in the 1890s, the League of American Wheelmen, which ran not just all the bike advocacy, like they were the first people that literally advocated for paved roads successfully. so the wheelmen could ride to the bar on their penny farthings. They also ran all of the racing, like any actual bike race that was legitimate in the U.S. was run by them. And in the 1890s, they passed a bylaw that was very controversial among their membership, very hotly debated, but they passed it, and it was a color bar, and it said only white people can be members of the league. And they actually only turned that around in the 1990s. Might have been the 1980s. Yeah, like it hadn't been enforced for many decades, but it was still on the books, which was a little embarrassing. And the historical legacy is very real. So I think when you go to like bicycle advocacy conferences and kind of see the people who are professionally doing these jobs, it's often very, very, very white, and often, people aren't sure why it is that way, and they're embarrassed to talk about it, and that's starting to change, I'm glad to report.
And is there the similar resistance to talking about feminism in cycling?
There sometimes is. I've noticed the sports end of cycling can be a little bit more touchy about that topic. But there are a lot of really strong women-led movements in all parts of cycling, which is really great to see. And it's really, I think, starting to shift where the word feminism is not such a dirty word.
Can you give us a sneak peek on some of the content in issue number 14?
Sure. I'm really excited about a lot of the contributors. There are about 15 of them. And let's see, there's a couple of them that deal with issues of domestic violence. When I first put out the call for proposals, the theme was just class. I was like, I want to hear your stories about class and money. And then, of course, everything is intersectional. So all of these other issues got brought into it. But some of the first submissions I got were about people who had used bicycling to escape from domestic violence situations and rebuild their lives. And I'm really excited to publish those. It's the kind of thing where I got the story and I was like, this is why I published this zine.
I really like the history of the bicycle as being an escape route for women. I mean, and it's been that way for so long.
Totally. It's like you can get on your bike and go wherever you want to go.
And fly away.
Exactly. Yeah, and then there's Adonia Lugo, who's a friend of mine. She has a PhD in anthropology, and before she got that, she was one of the co-founders of the Ciclavia, the big open streets event in Los Angeles. That's now just like an iconic LA event, and so she wrote her experience founding that, and I just love that because I feel like the people who kind of get the credit for things like that and become the public face of things like that are often, the loudest guy in the room. And which is not to say that the wrong people are getting credit for Ciclavia, but I just like her story. I like publishing her story about starting this iconic event because it really she's very generous in giving credit to all the people where it's due and kind of telling all the sides of the story. But in the end, it was like kind of her idea, her and her boyfriend at the time, and they made it happen, and she gives credit to herself too. And that's something I think a lot more of us could learn to do.
I've been trying to sort of discover how you got started on the whole writing about and creating feminist cycling zines and books. Can you give a brief history of that? And what's the driver for you to continue doing that?
I was a bicycle blogger for a long time. And one of the blogs I wrote for was bikeportland.org, which was sort of a famous Portland blog. And one of the last things I wrote before I left was sort of a big calling out of all the sexist things that had happened to me while I was writing for the blog. And I was really quite indignant about all of it. And I wrote one of those. I mean, now it's like this is the kind of thing you read on the internet every 5 seconds, but it was a little bit less that kind of thing then. And I got this huge response, and my boss, Jonathan Maas, was like, well, if you want to keep writing about this, that would probably be a good idea. And I was like, I could probably do that. So I wrote a zine. I sort of expanded that article and wrote a lot more and put out my first zine, the first issue of Taking the Lane, which I called Sharing the Road with Boys. And then I put it on Kickstarter, and I didn't think it would get funded. I was asking for like $300 or something, and I was like, no one will give me money for this. This is insane. But it was overfunded over the limit, and the response was just like people just started sending me contributions for the next issue, which I had not even planned to make. And that's kind of how it's been the whole time, is like, I'll put one out and everybody's like, all right, where's the next one? Like, there really is a demand to have a platform for women's stories in cycling, or just for like, men contribute to it too. And many, gender nonconforming people have contributed also. It's really, I think, a platform to have sort of stories that buck the status quo, stories that aren't necessarily caught up in these old gender narratives that are sometimes subconscious, especially in a lot of the cycling world.
Are you finding that women and I guess men who are writing for your zines are really excited to find out that there are other people who are interested in the same topic?
I think so. I think that's one of the coolest things. Like, most of the people who write things for me are readers. They find out about the zine from the zine itself, not from some random call for submission on the internet. So it does really feel like building a community in that way, which is awesome to be able to be part of.
So what are the important issues today in feminist cycling? Like, what are you talking about now that maybe you didn't talk about last year?
Well, that's a good question. I don't necessarily go based on, I normally go based on like my interests or reader ideas for the theme. And I've had themes for the issues, everything from like religion to dogs to working to science fiction. I don't really go with the times, I go with my whim, but this year the issue does feel really topical, just because we're in such a politicized time and in such a fraught time for class and identity issues. Like, a lot of things are really in the public consciousness and really changing. So, and I think that these are topics that people are grappling with at every level of society right now. So the 14th issue does feel very, very timely with its theme of biquity.
And do you feel positive about the change that you've seen since you've started this process, or what you're doing? And are you optimistic about the future?
I am optimistic. I don't know if I have good reason to be, but I feel like it's better to be than not to be. So I try to choose that.
I guess I should clarify. I don't mean optimistic about everything, but optimistic about women in cycling. Yeah, definitely. I've seen some really big changes. One of the biggest things is the family cycling movement has just taken off. And a lot of that has to do with there being this like wealth of new availability of cargo bikes, different kinds of cargo bikes that you can take your kids on, and the normalization of that. And I think that has, like it or not, possibly affected the prospects of women's cycling very strongly. I think other changes that I've seen have been the movements within different bicycle sports, particularly cyclocross and road racing, that have been really, really cool to see. Like, a lot of people have been stepping up and using their platform as racers to be like, hey, we need equal purses at events. We need to be paid for the pro work. If we're going to be professionals, we actually need to be able to do this professionally and not have another job. People sort of stepping up and showing that, like, in many races, it doesn't make a lot of sense at all, actually, to separate the men's and women's fields, and definitely not to pay them differently. So that has been awesome to see. That's really one of the most exciting things. And just kind of the culture has been changing. When I go to bike events, sometimes it's funny, like, my boyfriend will complain because people will treat him like the girlfriend, the invisible girlfriend. And come talk to me about feminism and cycling. I don't know if that's a sign of the times or not, but it definitely wasn't happening 10 years ago. So to get back to Taking the Lane, number 14, can people still buy it? And talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, people can buy Taking the Lane number 14. You can find it on my website, which is microcosmpublishing.com. And you can also find it, you might have to work a little harder to find it, at my old website, takingthelane.com.
And we'll also have a link to that in our episode notes.
Awesome. Thank you. And it's going to be $10, and it'll be like a little book. It's a little meatier than some of my older zines. And yeah, it should be available until it's sold out forever, which I would not expect to be anytime soon because we print a lot.
And why don't you give a little plug for the other books that you have available?
Oh, yeah, totally. Okay, so my publishing media empire, Taking the Lane, grew since 2010, and I think I published 6 or 7 books so far under the name Taking the Lane or Elly Blue Publishing. There's everything from a young adult steampunk science fiction novel called The Velocipede Races, written by Emily June Street, to nonfiction books like The Culinary Cyclist, which is a cookbook by Anna Brones, and Pedal, Stretch, Breathe, which is a yoga bicycling book by Kelly Reefer. And there's also the anthology Our Bodies, Our Bikes, which I co-edited with April Streeter. And, of course, there is the Bikes in Space series, which I'm doing the editorial work on the 5th volume of this feminist bicycle science fiction series. And the most recent volume that came out just this month is called Biketopia, and that's actually available in bookstores, which is kind of crazy for something that started as a little zine on Kickstarter.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it, and for you being on the podcast, and please come to Cleveland for your next Amtrak tour of Dinner and Bikes.
I would love to do that. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much to all 3 of my guests, Emma Pooley, Alison Dunlap, and Elly Blue. You can find links to their websites and social media on episode notes of the show at wissports.com. While you're on the site, please sign up for our monthly newsletter. We are on all the social media channels at wissports, and if you'd like to drop us a line with suggestions, comments, or questions, email us at info@wissports.com. We'd certainly love to hear from you. For more of me, listen to my other podcast, Hear Her Sports, available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and at hearhersports.com. Every other week, I talk to an exceptional female athlete in a wide range of sports. Find me also on social media at Hear Her Sports. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back next month with another episode of Off the Front.